Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Krishna Balaram Jaya Radha Shama Sundar Radha Shama Sundar Radhe Jaya Gauranitai 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 Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Srila Prabhupada Gaur Premanandi Hari Haribol Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajaka Acharya Asatorsha Sri Srimad ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Lila Prabhisha Om Vishnupad Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kahosh Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopanath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Gira Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Brajabhuman Dam Ki Jai, Shri Namari Mayapur Dam Ki Jai, Shila Chal Jagannath Puri Dam Ki Jai, Gangamayi Ki Jai, Jamunamayi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Shrimati Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. It was beautiful worship. Shri Shri Kilo Shri Shri Ram Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Shamshana Ki Jai, Shri Shri Govintai Bhagavan Ki Jai, Shri Kadashibrata Ki Jai, Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories to the seven devotees. All glories are glories to Shri Shri Guru and Guru. Glory to the Prabhupada. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Deving Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is our very means of conquest, let us offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of God and Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Srila Vyasadeva, who is the author, and unto Srila Prabhupada, who is the translator, commentator, and our spiritual master. Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. By regularly attending the Srimad Bhagavatam class and by rendering service unto the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving devotional service unto the personality of God and whose worship with transcendental songs becomes established as an irrevocable fact. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is entitled Samam Bonam. This is chapter 77, entitled Lord Krishna Slays Shalva, and today's text is 31. We're a little bit pressed for time, so we'll just read line by line responsively. Kwashokamo Hosnehova Vayang Bhayeg Sambhavaha Bhavaha. If there was no H with the dot on the end, it will be Sambhava, right? But when you add the H with the dot, it becomes Sambhavaha. So let's start again. Kwashokamo Hosnehova Vayang Bhayeg Sambhavaha Kochakandita Vijnana Gyana Shayastakanditaha Ashokamo Hosnehova Bhayang Bhayegna Sambhavaha Kochakandita Vijnana Gyana Shayastakanditaha Koshokamo Hosnehova Vayang Bhayegna Sambhavaha Kochakandita Vijnana Jnana Aishwaryastvakanditaha. Please sit. Okay, synonyms. Kwa. Where? Shoka. Lamentation. Moha. And bewilderment. Sneha. Material affection. Va. Or. Bhayam. Fear. Va. Or. Yea. Those which. Agnya. Out of ignorance. Sambhavaha. Born. Kwacha. And where, on the other hand. Akandita. Infinite. Vijnana. Whose perception? Jnana. Knowledge. Aishvaryaha. And power. To. But. Akanditaha. The infinite Supreme Lord. Now, we should know where we are in the Bhagavatam. Sometimes the devotees are confused when they get to the section of the Bhagavatam, they say, Srila Prabhupada's purport. But no, Srila Prabhupada stopped purporting the Bhagavatam at chapter 13 of the 10th canto. That was his last contribution to us. From the 14th chapter on to the 90th chapter, the translations and commentary are being given by Prabhupada's disciples. However, as we'll see in today's verse, because we already had the Christian book by Prabhupada's mercy, they start out by quoting Srila Prabhupada, and then they quote predecessor acharyas. So it's not that we overlook, oh, it's Prabhupada's disciples' purport, I don't need to. No, we don't think like that. We don't think like that. But we should understand that it's not directly Srila Prabhupada you're hearing from. So don't make that mistake. I've heard that so many places I go to, devotees are reading in this section of the Bhagavatam and they say, Srila Prabhupada's purport. No, it's Prabhupada's disciples' purport. So, first of all, the translation. And I know the team. Most of you know the team. Hriyananda Maharaj was the head of that team. The Sanskrit side, and Gopi Paramananda Prabhu, who is no longer with us. What a wonderful soul. And the English side was headed by Dravida. So those three devotees were the prime, you could say, authors of everything from the 14th chapter on to the 90th chapter. But again, they referred strictly to Prabhupada and to predecessor acharyas. So first the translation. How can lamentation, bewilderment, material affection, or fear, all born out of ignorance, be ascribed to the infinite Supreme Lord, whose perception, knowledge, and power are all similarly infinite? Purport by Srila Prabhupada's disciples. Srila Prabhupada writes, quote, lamentation, aggrievement, and bewilderment are characteristics of conditioned souls. But how can such things affect the person of the Supreme, who is full of knowledge, power, and all opulence? Actually, it is not at all possible that Lord Krishna was misled by the mystic jugglery of Shalava. He was displaying his pastime of playing the role of a human being. End of quote. Now, the disciples of Prabhupada continued in their commentary. All the great Bhagavatam commentators conclude that grief, illusion, attachment, and fear, which arise out of ignorance of the soul, can never be present in the transcendental, dramatic pastimes enacted by the Lord. Srila Jiva Goswami gives many examples from Krishna's pastimes to illustrate this point. For instance, when the coward boys entered the mouth of Aghasura, Lord Krishna was apparently astonished. Similarly, when Brahman took away Lord Krishna's coward boyfriends and calves, the Lord at first began to look for them as if he did not know where they were. Thus, the Lord plays the part of an ordinary human being so as to relish transcendental pastimes with his devotees. One should never think the personality of Godhead is an ordinary human person, as Shukadeva Goswami explains in this and the following verse. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavani Paschatya Deshnarine Om Agyana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishnang Stapitang Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishavangsha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vatam Tang Sajiva Sadvaitam Savadutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitangsha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhya Kripa Sambhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So by Srila Prabhupada's grace, I'm back in Vrindavan Dham after quite some absence. I think the last time I was here was 2018. But since we had a little Mridanga Katha at the beginning, I'll just tell that my first time was 76. Prabhupada had said that he wanted all his Western disciples to come for the Mayapur Vrindavan festival. It wasn't just the Mayapur festival, Mayapur Vrindavan festival. So some of the temple presidents, they objected, but Prabhupada, we can't afford to send everybody. And Prabhupada wrote back, you afford to eat every day, figure it out. So Prabhupada wanted all his disciples from all around the world to come to the Mayapur Vrindavan festival. So 76, I probably told this story many times, even here in Vrindavan, but we chartered one Air India plane and 400 plus devotees came, myself included. So we're on this flight coming towards India, and what do we do first thing in the morning? Mangalarti. So somebody starts, Sangsara Dava and Halal. And all the devotees get up and start jumping up and down. The pilot said, sit down! You can't do this. It's an airplane. So that was the beginning. So we landed in Calcutta. It was about 7 in the evening. We get to 7C Albert Road. That temple was there already. And before taking rest, they asked, would you like some prasadam? So of course. So all of us, most of us were brahmacharis, we go to the top floor, and the Bengali, most of the Bengali brahmacharis there, they sit down, and each one of them, they make a mound of rice about this tall. This is 9 o'clock at night. They fill it with dal, and so we're all bewildered. For us, evening prasadam meant a cookie and a cup of milk, and you listen to Krishna book. That was our training. First in New York, and then I shifted to LA in 75. So we were shocked that most of them were small stature, they can sit down and eat a mound. I said, are they going to make it to Mangalarti? After eating so much? So we go to Mayapur, and by bus, we arrive similarly about 7 in the evening, and they say that the conch building was there, but the lotus building was there, but only the foundation of that long building was there. So that's where we were going to stay. They put some tarps and they put some tenting. So when we were going to the section where we were supposed to stay, there was this huge commotion. So we asked the devotees, what's going on? They said, oh, there was a cobra, we just killed it. Welcome to Mayapur. So the next day, one of the local devotees told me, he said, Prabhu, if you knew how many cobras were in Mayapur, you wouldn't come. But they have the ability to coexist peacefully with humans, generally. So that was the beginning. So then I got my second initiation from Prabhupada in his quarters, and you can read everything that happened at that festival is recorded, more or less. Every morning walk, every class that Prabhupada gave. So then after that, we shifted to Delhi, and we did some Pandal programs. And I remember Prabhupada staying in some life member's house. I don't remember if you remember the name. It was my first exposure to a very wealthy Indian family's house, all white marble, and so Prabhupada was staying there. But of course the devotees stayed elsewhere. And then Prabhupada was doing a Pandal program. And the reason why I mentioned it was because I had bought a Mridanga in Mayapur and took it to Delhi. And if you have read the 7-volume Prabhupada Leelamrita by Satsur Maharaj, in that first volume there's a photograph. Prabhupada is on the stage of the Pandal. He's sitting on a Vyasasana, and a couple levels down I'm sitting there playing Mridanga. So that Mridanga made it from Mayapur to Delhi, here to Vrindavan, all the way back to LA. And within 2 weeks, there was a hot kirtan going on in the temple, and I slammed into another devotee playing Mridanga, and the Mridanga broke. So Prabhupada was keen, but he's noticed everything. That's when he said, "You're breaking so many Mridangas. Use your American ingenuity to make a Mridanga that will not break." So that's when the Balaram Mridanga was created. So Prabhupada said, use your American brains, make a Mridanga that will not break. So, as we all know, they don't sound as nice as the original Indian Mridanga, but they certainly do last a long time. Anyway, before I go a little further into substantiating what Prabhupada said and the Acharya's quote here, I just wanted to read something that Prabhupada said in a lecture from Chaitanya Charitamrita related to this Vrindavan festival, and also connected to today's verse. So Prabhupada is giving a lecture in 67 in New York, Madhyalila, chapter 20, text 396. Goloko Gokula Dhamma Vibhu Krishna Sama Krishnechaya Brahmanda Gani Tahara Sankrama. Translation of the verse is, the spiritual abode known as Goloka, which is a pasturing land for Surabhi cows, is as powerful and opulent as Krishna. By the will of Krishna, the original Goloka and Gokula Dhams are manifested with him in all the universes. Then Prabhupada begins his lecture. I'm just going to recite a portion of it. Now, Goloka Gokula Dhamma, Vibhu Krishna Sama. Because the Lord is absolute, therefore his name, his fame, his quality, his form, his associates, his paraphernalia, everything absolute, non-different. God and God's name, non-different. God and God's place, non-different. And for that reason, when Krishna comes, the absolute, the Vrindavan, the place where he descends, that is non-different. So, hearing from the Acharyas, we should understand, we're not sitting in just some little corner of India, UP. We're sitting in Gokula. Actually, you can see that. That Vrindavana, that place is a small spot of land, say about 84 miles area. But any person, and however atheistic he may be, and however nonsense he may be, if he goes to that place, he'll feel Krishna's presence. Everybody feeling Krishna's presence? Yes? Hare Krishna. Still, simply by going there, he'll at once change his mind that, quote, here is God. He'll accept it. Still, if you like, you can go to India and you can see. Make an experiment. So tell anybody who has doubts about Krishna, make an experiment. Come to Vrindavan. So although Vrindavan is a place for the personalist, now all the impersonalists, school of India, they're making their ashram at Vrindavan. Because they have failed to achieve the sense of God anywhere, they're coming to Vrindavan. It is such a nice place. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So here, Lord Chaitanya says that Goloka Gokula Dhamma Vibhu Krishna Sama. Just like Krishna is unlimited, similarly, his place is also unlimited. It is not limited by the material laws. Similarly, his name is unlimited. When we chant Hare Krishna, the Hare Krishna, this name, the holy name, has got unlimited potency. Simply you have to realize it. So that's another experiment to do while we're in Vrindavan. How much can we realize that Krishna's name is not different from Krishna? Prabhupada continues, even God is present before us, we cannot realize. When Krishna was present before us on this earth, not that all people of the world or all people of India could recognize. Only few people, the Pandavas and the inhabitants of Vrindavan, inhabitants of Dwarka, some of them could understand. So it requires training only. Otherwise, the unlimited God can be seen even within this limited sphere of material existence. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So this was a problem with Shalva. Ontologically, we're all the same. Jiva souls. There's no difference. It's not that sometimes people make this mistake. They think there are different classes of jivas. No, there's one class of jiva. Krishna's eternal part and parcel. Mamai Mangsha Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Saratana. Krishna doesn't say, I have a topmost class of jiva, and then there's a middle class of jiva, and then there's a lower class. No, all jivas are ontologically the same. However, some jivas by their free will turn away from Krishna, and they have to be placed in the reformatory school, this material world. So when we're here, we can become so covered that not only we forget that we're part and parcel of Krishna, we want to attack Krishna, like Shalva did. So covered. Eternal part and parcel of Krishna can become so covered that we want to attack the Supreme Lord. And Krishna fulfills everybody's desire. He says, yeah, come on. Show me what you got. So Shalva was showing everything, his mystic potency, his this and that. And Krishna, for the sake of pastime, as was mentioned, the quote from Prabhupada, for the sake of pastime, Krishna appears to be bewildered. But how can he be bewildered? Bewilderment is a feature of the living entity who is covered by the external potency of the Lord. In the 13th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives from text 8 through 12 inclusive, so that means 5 verses, not 4, 5 verses. He gives a list of 20 items of knowledge. And included in this, asakti anabhishpanga, putra dhargaharishu. Detachment, asakti, anabhishpanga, putra dhargaharishu. Detachment from putra, children, dhara, wife, griha, house, and everything else attached to it. So if Krishna is teaching that as an item of knowledge, how can he himself be attached? But hold on. Now, does that mean there's no attachment on the spiritual platform? Absolutely not. Obviously, there's attachment. There's absolute attachment. And therefore, Prabhupada will tell us repeatedly, develop your attachment for Krishna as your son, as your father, as your master, as your lover, as your parent. You will never be disappointed because Krishna is the absolute truth. Any shadow attachment that we have here, for putra, dara, griha, adishu, it will be broken. It's just a question of time. It's just a question of time. But foolishly, we give more importance to putra, dara, griha, adishu than we do to Krishna. But Vrindavan means that place where one can easily not imitate, but follow in the footsteps of those who are eternally attached to Krishna as son, Yashoda Nanda Maharaj, as coward boyfriend, as object of romantic love from the gopis. And one can have also parental, or in Vrindavan there's no neutral. Even those that appear to be neutral, like the land and the trees and the flowers, they're not neutral. They're actually very, very much attached to Krishna personally, not in some neutral way. So yes, Krishna gives so much evidence himself in the Bhagavad Gita, and there's so much evidence in the Srimad Bhagavatam that there's no way Krishna can be bewildered. It says, this verse, having a senior moment here. Aparak sangsritim goram, yan nama bhavishogiram, tato sadyo vimuchita, yabibeti swayamaya. That living entities are entangled in the complicated meshes of birth and death can be freed by even once chanting the holy name of Krishna, which is feared by fear personified. So if fear personified fears Krishna's name, how can Krishna himself be afraid of Shalva or anybody else? So it's just, again, just pastime, Krishna's pastime. And we should understand and take full shelter of the name and the named. This is the concession in Kali Yuga. I mean, the chanting of Hare Krishna is there in every yuga. But specifically in this yuga, We're given the concession that if we just sincerely chant the holy name, we're not qualified to have, we don't have the lifespan like they did in Satya Yuga to sit down and meditate for 40, 50, 60,000 years. It's not possible. So anybody who's making a show of this kind of meditation, it's just a show. Prabhupada made fun. He said in the West there's so many yoga societies, they sit down for 15 minutes with the eyes closed, so-called meditating, and then they go outside and light a cigarette. What kind of meditation is that? They're meditating on cigarette, not on Krishna. And then Treta Yuga, elaborate sacrifices, very expensive, all utensils made of gold. And the Brahmanas were so self-satisfied that when they were leaving the sacrifice, they would give them huge quantities of gold and they would just throw them and, to pile up in one mountain. So when Pandavas needed money for Rajasuya sacrifice, Krishna told Arjuna, you go to this particular place where all that gold was stacked up. And that's why he got the name Dhananjaya. And then in the Dwapara Yuga, elaborate temple worship, we're doing some semblance of that here and elsewhere in ISKCON. And there's still some temples in India that have survived for hundreds of years. But again, they're not on the scale of Dwapara Yuga, where everything was real. No plastic jewelry. Everything was real gold, silver. And that's why the British came here. Because they realized India is such a rich place. They're putting real rubies and diamonds on idols. Let us take it back. And what do they do? Put them in the museum somewhere. Or maybe the queen or king got to wear a few on them. But they're thieves. Everything belongs to Krishna. And everything should be used in Krishna's service. Unfortunately, not everybody got the word that in ISKCON we're using plastic jewelry. So in some places our temples have been attacked. Because people thought that we have real gold and real jewels. There was one case in Africa. Some of my godbrothers may know. Some of you younger devotees may not be aware. There was one devotee from America who was serving in this temple in Africa. And the local Africans, they thought, these Hare Krishnas, they're so rich. They're putting all these diamonds and jewels on their idols. So they attacked one day with machetes. And this devotee was so brave. He was the Pujari. He was fighting by himself against them. And he put up one arm and they cut it off and he was still fighting. So they were shocked. They saw the blood coming out and these guys, they ran away. So this is our duty, to put our life on the line, if we have to protect the deities and the devotees. This is real Kshatriya. This is real Kshatriya. Not in the name of Kshatriya, I get some administrative position and then I just use it to shake everybody down, take their money. This is pseudo Kshatriya. In 1995, I was on a tour in Russia. So Moscow, Samara, Rostov, Zadar. Then we went to Armenia, Yerevan, Razdan, Kirvakia, and like that. And then we crossed into Georgia. And then we were trying to get back into Russia through Ingushetia. But there was a war going on in Grozny, so they wouldn't let us cross. So the so-called Kshatriyas at the border guard, their only business was stealing. There was always a long line of trucks waiting to cross the border. Why? Artificially. They would just let them stand there for a day, 2 days, so they would get anxious. And they would just go from truck to truck, and whatever the person had in the truck, they had to give some percentage to the Kshatriyas. So if you were carrying produce, you had to give some produce. If you had some furniture, you had to leave some furniture. So because we couldn't cross the border, we had to stay overnight. And we saw they had a huge go down, full. But this is not Kshatriya. Prabhupada said in 75 in Los Angeles, New Dwarkadam. He said, I notice you're not taking protection of the deities and the devotees seriously. He said, protection means some of your men Were you there that when Prabhupada said that? It was 75. You were there, yeah. Prabhupada said some of your men have to be trained how to use guns and sticks. So of course there was, core of devotees who considered themselves to be chargers. So immediately they started practicing with sticks and how to shoot guns like that. But yes, some portion of our men, I know some ladies also feel martially inclined, but we should confine it to the men. We're not like these nowadays, they want to send the women into battle. No. Some of our men have to be trained how to use guns and sticks to protect the deities and the devotees. Now again, it's Krishna's Leela. It's not that Krishna needs protection, just like he didn't need protection of Maya Yashoda. What she always felt, because she had that Vatsalya Ras, she had to protect Krishna. The monkeys may not get to Krishna, he may not eat something that may upset you like that. You're always in that anxiety. But that anxiety is spiritual bliss. It's not ordinary anxiety. Just like Krishna's apparent bewilderment here is not material. It's part of his Leela. Everything that happens in this material world is Krishna's Leela. We may not understand that, but Krishna's devotees know. Everywhere I go, I try to promote this because a lot of us know quite a few prayers from the Bhagavatam, Kunti's prayers, and even Gajendra's prayers, but very few devotees know Shukadev Goswami's prayers. And he is a famous speaker of the Bhagavatam. They start in the second canto, chapter 4. And the very first verse, he says this. Namak parasmai purushaya bhuyase sad udbhavasthana nirodha leelaya grihita shakti chitayaya dehinam antarbhavayanu palakshmi varmani. So there's a recording of Prabhupada chanting those prayers. So what does he say? I offer my obeisances unto the personality of Godhead. Namak parasmai purushaya yad udbhava sthana nirodha leelaya. The creation, maintenance, and destruction of this material world is leela. It's not difficult. It's not that Krishna has to sit down and labor to create the world and maintain it. It's all leela. Everything going on, including these 10th canto pastimes. But everything here is Krishna's Leela. So we may think, my suffering, I'm suffering here. You're calling that Leela, God's Leela? No, you're not suffering. Anarto pasamam sakshat, bhakti yoga madoksita, lokasya janata abhiman, chakra, sangitam. That the material miseries of the living entity are superfluous. They're superfluous. We're not actually taking birth and dying and going through so much growing pains and maintenance pains. And it's all superfluous. Anarto pasamam sakshat, bhakti yoga manokshate. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva has given us this Bhagavatam, this bhakti yoga process, including hearing this Bhagavatam every day. And that's what will bring us out of the illusion that we're taking birth and dying and going through so many old age and disease and all that. It's all superfluous. It's not really happening. It's not really happening. And to get out of the illusion, you have to become absorbed in devotional service. So absorbed that the passage of time becomes concentrated to the eternal now. We're always in the present, always engaged in some kind of savor to Krishna. I give one example from America. In the old days, we used to, I know maybe still, Shastra, I don't know if you go to state fairs. You know, they used to have these state fairs. Every state would have their own fair, and they would have some exhibit of animal husbandry and cooking and this and that. So devotees would always sneak in under some guys and then set up a book table. So one devotee was at a book fair, set up a book table, distributing books, and one Christian guy came up and kept trying to interrupt. Don't buy their books, they're demons. And the devotees would just ignore him. He would go away, he would come back. So he got so frustrated, he came with a gun and pointed at the devotee. And the devotee just literally pushed his hand aside and kept distributing books. The guy was so shocked, he just walked away. It wasn't artificial. The devotee was so absorbed in the mellows of distributing books that he didn't even notice this thing. And that happens in any service. The devotees who address the deities every day, they can tell you can't do this day after day, week after week, year after year if you're not absorbed. It's not a material, it's not that you get there that you're getting some material compensation. And yes, in the beginning, all of our efforts are tinged with desire for name, fame, profit, like that. Nobody comes in as a pure devotee. Well, maybe some are born. Like Shastrika's daughter, Danya, she's here right now. I'm totally convinced she's a pure devotee of the Lord. How old is she now? 4 years old? 5? She's already distributed more books than I can distribute in lifetimes. So some souls take birth in ISKCON completely pure. But most of us, we have to go through the mixed Karma Mishra Bhakti, Yoga Mishra Bhakti, like that, Jnana Mishra Bhakti, until we come to the pure stage. So we can't, fake it. We used to have a saying, fake it till you make it. But no, you can't fake purity, but you should strive for it. So these devotees who are addressing the deities, or even those who are just bringing the flowers. Because sometimes we become so enamored of the deity dressing that we glorify the pujaris over and over again. But again, in New Dwarka in 75, Prabhupada said, the gardener who's growing the rose is just as important as the pujari who is offering the rose. Sometimes we forget that. We glorify the pujaris, we glorify the book distributors. But if nobody was cooking, there would be no Haribol, Haribol. Nobody would want to go out and do any preaching. Actually, we should understand that we don't preach. Yesterday I had to intercede. One young devotee approached Hansadutta while I was standing here. I said, Prabhu, I want to ask a question. I'm preaching sometime. And I had to jump in. I said, no. You have to remember, Prabhupada himself said this. One devotee came to Prabhupada and said, Prabhupada, sometimes when I'm preaching, Prabhupada said, no, you're not preaching, I'm preaching. I'm preaching, you are assisting me. So as long as we keep that mentality, otherwise it's so easy to become puffed up. I'm a big preacher, I bring in so many lakhs and crores of rupees, I make so many new devotees. You're not doing anything. It's all Prabhupada's potency. And if we forget that, and Prabhupada pulls the rug, then Punar Mushtika Bhav. Punar Mushtika Bhav. Everybody know that story, right? There was one mouse who was being harassed by a cat. So he went to the saintly person. He knew the saintly person could help. My dear saintly person, I'm being harassed by this cat. So what do you want? Can you make me a cat? Okay, you're a cat. So he went off. A few days later, he came running back again. My dear saintly person, okay, what do you want this time? I'm being harassed by a dog. Okay, what do you want me to do? Can you make me a dog? Made him a dog. A few days later, he came back. My dear saintly person, what's the problem this time? I'm being harassed by a tiger. Can you do something? Yes. What do you want? You want me to make you a tiger? Okay, you're a tiger. So when he made him a tiger, he was looking at the saintly person, licking his lips. What do you want? You want to eat me? Yes. Mudar Murshika Baba, again become a mouse. So we should remember that. We are all Prabhupada's servants, assistants. And if we lose that mood, then anytime Prabhupada can Punar Murshika Baba, again become a nobody. Never ever cultivate this feeling of being big this or big that. What big in this whole material world is nothing. Here today, gone tomorrow. You know that story of Loma Sharishi? He was a very, very hairy fellow. Very hairy fellow. But he got the benediction, and every time Lord Brahma would leave, one hair would fall, and when all the hairs would fall from the body, then he would go back to God. So his students, disciples, Guru Maharaj, we notice you're standing out, you don't even have a cottage. He said, I'm not going to be here very long. Not going to be here very long. Why do I need a cottage? We're just the opposite. We're here for a few days. I know myself, I'm speaking, not just about myself. I need an AC room and this and that. For the first time I came in 76, there was no AC room. There was only Pogla Ashram. And I did get very, very sick. Amoebic dysentery. Left LA weighing about 150 pounds, went back weighing about 120 pounds. But it was worth it. Mayapur Festival, Delhi Padma programs, Vrindavan Festival, getting to hear Prabhupada lecture every single day. That was worth any amount of kilos weight loss. So my advice to myself and to all of you, try to maintain the proper mood of seva, not just engage in seva, but in the proper mood. Always taking shelter of Guru, Krishna, because without them, we cannot do anything. We're completely useless. And if it has not yet been demonstrated to you, trust me, if we have the wrong attitude, Krishna will arrange the right situation where whatever you think is your strength, you think you're a big, big pundit, and you're ready to recite that shloka to knock them away, and nothing comes out. Or you think you're a big, big cook, and somebody comes running up to you after Raj Bhoga, what did you put in that sabji? It tastes horrible. Like one Mataji in LA, she had the task of making the Charanamrita every morning. And one morning, I don't know if she was in ecstasy or what, she put salt instead of sugar. So Prabhupada came, his normal routine where we take darshan of the deities, and they come and take Charanamrita. So Prabhupada said, who has made it? Never again. Don't. Prabhupada was heavy. Sometimes, people like to make Prabhupada into somebody who was just, anything goes. No, Prabhupada was very heavy. Who has made this? Never again. No more. No more disable. So we have to be very careful. Whatever we're doing, if we don't take the proper shelter, don't have the right mood. But it's not always obvious. Sometimes it may seem that one becomes materially very prosperous. There are many devotees who have come to ISKCON and then branched away from ISKCON. They're very proud because they have this patra, that, and they have so much money and so many temples they created on their own. And it doesn't mean that you're pleased your spiritual master. It doesn't mean you're pleased your spiritual master. And pleasing the spiritual master is the only way. And that's why I'm always heavy about this pronunciation of the last verse of the Sikshastaka, the 8th verse actually. There's one after that, one false tuti. Yasya prasada Bhagavat prasada. Yasya prasada Nagatir Kato. Many devotees, they say Yasya prasada and Yasya prasada. No, it's by the mercy of the spiritual master one can attain him. Yasya aprasada. When you put that together, you get Yasya prasada Nagatir Kato. You have no standing if you don't please your spiritual master. So we should always remember that. So again, to summarize, Krishna is not bewildered by Shava's so-called mystic powers, because he's Yogeshwara. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna. Yatra Partha Dhanordhara. Tatta Shri Vidya Bhutir. Dhruvam Nitir Matir. So if Krishna can empower Arjuna to be successful, where's there any question of Krishna not being successful? Okay, we can stop here. Any question, comment? I think, what time were we ending? 9:30. So we have a few minutes for some discussion. Yes, round of applause.
Really directed so many lectures, not only just in New York, but I have old ears. And when you all speak so quickly, I can't follow. So I wish there were a little sign up.
But there's also the saying, you can take the devotee out of New York, but you can't take New York out of the devotees. So New Yorkers tend to speak very quickly. So sorry about that. Anybody?
Thank you for the class.
Hare Krishna.
I remember back in 76 or 77 reading by Srila Prabhupada
preaching to the scientists is the most important, because the scientists are the most influential people in the world. So as we were reading these purports just prior to the beginning of this festival, it was describing the amazing mystic power of Shalva, and how he even seemingly bewildered Lord Krishna, where he appeared to chop off Vasudev's head, and Krishna for a moment was astonished. And we're reading here in the purport today, Shukadeva Goswami is speaking to Parikshit Maharaj, and Prabhupada is saying, it's not at all possible that Lord Krishna was misled by the mystic jugglery of Shalva. He was displaying his pastime of playing the role of a human being. So for the last 5 years, I've been observing how we've been inundated with statements like, trust the science, follow the science. And a great deal of pseudoscience, or scientism, as it's sometimes called, has affected the whole world, including many, many devotees. So Standa Prabhu, our godmother, said to me a few years ago, you know, Gora, Prabhupada didn't print Life Comes from Life just for the conditioned souls. He said, Prabhupada had to print it for us, because we still have shreds of faith in modern science. And Prabhupada was trying to chop away at that. So in your opinion, with all of the confusion that we've seen in the world over the last 5 years, do you think this was all Krishna's Leela, or how would you explain that we didn't have a unified front against all the pseudoscience that we've been overwhelmed with?
Krishna has a very tough job, as Prabhupada explained. One man is going to bed and he wants to lock up his house, and he's praying to God, but hey, Bhagavan, make sure, please, nobody comes and takes anything. And then another guy outside is praying, hey, Bhagavan, please give me an open window somewhere so I can go and steal. So Krishna has to satisfy everybody. So he has to satisfy this and their followers. But Prabhupada would say, it's not science if it's changing every other year. And I have personal experience. I'm sure you do too, because you're about my age. I was born in 52. So when I was learning science in elementary school, they were teaching us that there is no life at the deepest part of the ocean. It's too dark, the pressure is too great, nothing can live there. And I just checked again recently on Google to make sure I wasn't just making it up. That's what they were teaching in the 50s and early 60s as science. No life at the bottom of the ocean. Lo and behold, when they were finally able to make submersibles that could go down that far, there's life everywhere on the bottom of the ocean. There's these tube worms, even in the most inhospitable parts, where there's fissures in the cracks in the rock crust, and all this hot sulfuric acid is bubbling up. There's life forms there. So that's not science. The problem is, they teach it as science, and you're not allowed to think. They claim, come to school so we teach you how to think. They don't want you to think. Come to school so we teach you how to regurgitate. Listen to what we say, and regurgitate exactly, and when the exam comes, you get an A, you're a great student. No thinking allowed. They don't want you to think. But the evidence from the Vedic reality is so strong that they can't avoid it. That's why even as far back as Hitler, because they wanted to win so badly, they were sending German scientists here to study the Hindu scriptures to see if there's any reality behind the apparent atomic bombs and flying vehicles. And so the evidence is so great that it's difficult for anybody with a little brain to. And that's why our Druta Karma, to this day, he's so popular in the Mutual UFO Network Society. They invite him all the time to speak. Yeah, Druta Karma. They know him as Michael Cremo. But they invite him to speak because he gives evidence from the Vedas as to the reality of Vimanas and nuclear weapons. And it's too great to. But the mainstream scientists, they're so rascal. Even when they themselves doubt their theories that they've produced, they will still go on teaching it in the schools. They will not allow the God theory to exist. Only our Darwinian evolution theory. So what can be done? What can be done? Go on distributing. Not just Life Comes from Life, but all of Prabhupada's books, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, they all hammer home the point that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead. His name is Krishna. He's produced all of this, everything that you see. And yes, these books are meant primarily for us. There was a famous conversation Prabhupada had with Rameshwar. I was there, 75 in LA. The boys were just beginning to distribute 100 big books at a time at the airport. So Rameshwar was very excited. Prabhupada, they're distributing 100 big books a day at the airport. Individual, not collectively. Individual devotees distributing 100 or more big books a day. So he was expecting Prabhupada to, be very excited and give. Prabhupada is very serious. He waited a few moments and then he said, "What are they reading my books?" He said, "These books are not meant just for selling." Turn it off, turn it off. "These books are not meant just for selling. They're meant for my students to read." So that's our first commitment to Prabhupada. Yes, it's nice that we get up every day eager to set up a stall, but how much reading have we done that morning? How much reading did we do the night before? So if you want to be an effective book distributor, you have to read Prabhupada's books effectively. And that was my good fortune to be part of the book production from the early days till now. That I had an opportunity to not only produce Prabhupada's books, but read them thoroughly. So we should all do that. Take advantage while you're still young. Brahmacharis especially should know Prabhupada's books inside and out. When I was a brahmachari, Henry Street, that temple was just such a phenomenon, because so many of the devotees from that temple are still active. Like Hansarupa, who's now the temple president, he joined a few months after me on Henry Street. Dravida, Toshan Krishna, so many devotees from Henry Street are still active in Prabhupada's movement. Daivi Shakti, what a gem. So the reason I'm mentioning is because as a brahmachari in those days, the senior brahmacharis, meaning they could be 6 months a year, but they were studying, so they reserved the right to stop any new brahmachari. Let's sit down and recite 7th chapter from heart, from memory. So you became so fearful, you had to study. So I reserve the right, anytime I come to Vrindavan, or maybe before I leave, to stop any brahmachari. Let's sit down and recite. Your favorite chapter, whatever. I don't want to confine you to 7th chapter, 6. Even the 1st chapter, which is the hardest chapter to learn. That same trip when I was in Moscow, they have a Gurukul there. They had, I don't know if they still do. It was a long time ago, 95. So they were showing me around. Prabhu, this is the Gurukul. We have children from age 5 to 14, I think it was at the time. Would you like the children to recite maybe something from Gita? Sure. So the 7-year-olds, they brought them together, and they recited 1st chapter of Bhagavad Gita from memory. That's not easy. I guarantee you most of the senior devotees here can't do that. Dharma Kshetra, Kurukshetra, Samaveta, Yutsava, Mama Panavas, Jaiva, Kimakurvata Sanjaya. From the first verse all the way through. I was shocked. Because I thought, I knew, some verses from Gita, but I didn't know the 1st chapter by heart. Some of the verses, most important ones, but not the whole thing by heart. So this is the responsibility of the parents. If the parents are not into it, you can't force your kids into it. So the parents have to set the example. Read Gita every day. And encourage your youngsters to read Gita every day. And even the non-devotees in India, they know this. I saw one study several years ago. They did, it's just some non-devotees, some scientifically inclined Indians. They did a study that children in India who know Bhagavad Gita as much as possible, they become better students. So even if you want your son, daughter to be doctor, lawyer, whatever, I don't know why you would want that in this age. whether to just be a full-on Hare Krishna. But you can be a full-on Hare Krishna and be a doctor lawyer. It's okay. But if that's your desire, still they should study Bhagavad Gita. At least one shloka every day. Read. If you want them to be successful. Then they become not only materially successful, but spiritually successful. Okay, anything? One more last, if anyone? Okay. Prantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki